Let's talk about some of the most feared and dominant cards to ever exist in Hearthstone Arena. Raid Boss Onyxia. This one card comes with 20 damage worth of rush, including this 8/8 dragon with immune, sometimes making it straight up impossible to kill. Before her, there was another dragon that was the Queen of Arena, Ysera the Dreamer. Why was Ysera so strong? Well, she wasn't really one card, she was 6 for the price of 1. Good luck ever getting on board again after Ysera was played. Big minion? Dream it away. Multiple minions? Awakens, blow it all away. No minions? Good luck surviving Ysera and these other minions that come along with her. There's an endless supply on the internet of threads over the last couple years demanding these cards be banned from Arena, criticizing Blizzard. What are you thinking? Why is this card in this mode? This card absolutely needs to be removed. Until this card is gone, I'm gone. What on earth are you thinking, Blizzard? But now the year is 2023 and Arena is at the highest power level it's ever been. So I want to make this video talking about the 10 strongest cards in Arena today. So why did I start out talking about these two cards in particular? Well, the reason is simple. These cards are not even strong enough to make the top 10. So what absolute abominations are strong enough to get it into the top 10 ahead of these cards? Well, let's get right into it. Oh my god! So the first card and also the first colossal on this list is the Leviathan. The Leviathan comes with 2 bodies, both with Divine Shield, a 4/5 and a 4/2. The main body gives Dredge after attacking, and the appendage gives a card draw after attacking. So in total, for the relatively low price of 7 mana, you get 8 damage onto the board, a card draw, and a dredge. It's very important to note that oftentimes it is better to draw first so you have more information for what you actually want to dredge up, as opposed to dredging first and then getting the dredge draw immediately. It is one of the only colossals that actually directly generates value in addition to just doing way too much for its mana cost, including leaving behind that 4/2, which if your opponent doesn't kill it, which they almost always will be able to, but you leave that threat of getting additional card draws as well. However, the only thing holding it down on this list is the simple fact that card just does not swing the game at the level that a lot of the cards on this list will. It is not one of those cards that wins the game by itself. However, it would be a very, very useful tool in any decent deck to just pull ahead and lead you towards victory. So that's what earns it a slot on this list. No, no, no! So the next card on this list is Ara'lon. So Ara'lon, unlike the Leviathan before, this is a card that if your opponent plays this, particularly on curve, you're probably just dead, let's be honest. It's 5 mana for, I don't even want to add up however many stats that is. It's completely ridiculous. And what's insane about it is the fact that you can't even just use a mass board clear to clear it because it doesn't even all come to the board at the same time. A lot of it's dormant. So it becomes actually difficult to interact with it, but also it's just such an overwhelming amount of tempo and stats, and it even does burn damage through the weapon that is unbelievably difficult to deal with. You have really only 3 options when an Ara'lon comes down. Option 1 is kill the opponent immediately. Option 2 is just try to hold on for dear life. And option 3 is to die, which is, pretty much usually what's going to happen. So the one thing preventing this card from being any higher on this list is that it is essentially limited by the fact that it has a timing window, and if you don't particularly play it early on, turn 5, turn 6, or maybe earlier with coin, it's simply not going to do as much later on. So anytime you're playing as a hunter, you really just hope that they don't have this, at least don't have it early enough to just win the game automatically with it. Blizzard! The next card we have on this list is Xhilag of the Abyss, and I bet this is going to be the most surprising card on this list for a couple reasons. First of all, a lot of people who play Arena have probably forgotten this card exists because Demon Hunter is really, really bad right now as of recording this video. But another reason is that some people may not know, because again, this card hasn't been seen a lot, that this card was actually buffed. It used to be that the stock started at 1 damage and now they deal 2 damage by default. And that is very important because when they only dealt 1 damage, yeah, this card was not very good. But starting with 2 damage, this just does a lot, right? Compare this to Leviathan, it's the same damage output, 8 damage the turn that you play it. But compared to Leviathan, this is just a whole lot harder to deal with. All that random damage will likely deal with small minions on the opponent's board, and it essentially puts them in a situation where they need to have very specific answers like area of effect damage, or else they're simply not going to be able to deal with everything. So even though Demon Hunter is bad, I think this card and the stats I've seen indicate that this thing just has an undeniable level of power. So that is why I put it where I do, and it was very hard to find. I think this is the clip you're watching is the one time I actually played against Xhilag. Unfortunately for my opponent, he played it when he was already dead. So, you know, trust me, the card is good. Just don't play it when your opponent has lethal on board. What on earth is that? Next up at number 7 on this list, we have Crabatoa. Now, I know that this is one of the colossals that is seen as one of the worst colossals by a lot of people, which is weird to me because it's actually one of the ones that sees the most play and constructed, but still people have this opinion of it because Crabatoa earns a very high spot on this list because it is a really good card. There are a few advantages that this colossal has over a lot of the other ones. First of all, it is the cheapest colossal. It only costs 6 mana. And because you can actually deal up to 12 damage the turn that it is played, it just has an extreme amount of efficiency. But as well, it deals 4 damage the turn it's played to the opponent's face, and 6 that are essentially undeniable as well if you want to. So it just does a lot, but again, the critical factor is that it is just so cheap. Even these like 7 mana colossals, for example, sometimes you're just a little bit too far behind by that point, and Crabatoa just comes down that a little bit earlier. That just allows it to always be a factor in the game, and sometimes that's what you really need from your premium cards. Just make sure that you get to play it and swing the board back in your favor before you're dead. So no matter what situation you're in, whether you're just trying to hold on or whether you're just trying to finish off your opponent, essentially no matter what, Crabatoa will do something that is going to help you achieve that. So that is why Crabatoa is so high on this list. How is that even a thing? So next up on this list, not quite making the top 5, is the one neutral card on this list. That is Astalor. So Astalor is an insanely powerful card. You can almost look at it as the new Ysera because it's essentially this big card that is just a whole lot of value. And now, what is the big weakness of these big cards that have a whole lot of value? Well, you have to live long enough to actually realize that value. A 9 or 10 mana card just isn't great for you when you're dead on turn 7. But now that is where Astalor is so cool because Astalor actually helps you get there. It was nerfed, but even after that, you can still play, you can play it as a 2/2 on turn 2 if you want, but later on you can use it as a removal tool. You can either play a 5 mana 5/5 on curve, or you can use it on turn 8 to get some armor, which will get you to the third mode, which you're trying to hold out for, which is on turn 10 to get that 14 damage, which is just an insane amount of efficiency and pure value, which will often be game winning. Astalor is just one of those cards which essentially gives you a whole lot of inevitability, and oftentimes the best way to beat an Astalor is just to kill them before they can get to 10 mana, which again is made slightly more difficult often by the Astalor's earlier modes itself, although sometimes as well, particularly the second mode can be a little bit expensive, it can be difficult to get out, and that could put you at a tempo liability. However, anytime you're not under immediate pressure of dying, that Astalor is just going to be a whole lot of value, and that's going to lead you to a whole lot of wins, making it a really strong card on this list. What is that thing? So next up, we have the first card in the top 5 of this list, and that is the Shaman Colossal Glugg the Gulper. So this actually is probably personally the card I like the least from a design perspective. I want to explain why, because there are a lot of Colossals that create swings, and a lot of these powerful cards create swings, but this is the one card out of all the Colossals that it just kills you. Anything, including anything else you just happen to have on board, if it dies, it will add stats to the main body of Glugg. So that creates a situation where either you need to be able to board clear the entire board immediately, or you need to have a silence or some other hard move for the Glugg the Gulper, or generally speaking, you will die, because Glugg the Gulper is going to go up to an insane amount of stats if you had anything else to be able to trade off, and if any of the taunts were able to die before the actual Glugg dies. So that is the big difference, and we have it in some of these clips here where I think I have one clip specifically where my opponent is at 30 health, he takes 2 shots from Glugg with no help, and he just immediately dies. You know, you can combo this with rushes, taunts in a lot of ways, and this will essentially turn into the most direct card possible as far as winning the game by itself, because it can literally 30-0 your opponent. And that pure upside, as well as just its value consistency, it's very hard to deal with without the perfect answer. It just gets it to a very high slot on this list.
What? That's insane!
Now, moving on to number 4 on this list, we have the Scourge. So, what do you have to say about the Scourge? I mean, the Scourge is a 9-mana spell, summons a bunch of undeads, and there are some nice things you can get with undeads. In addition to the stats, you can get lifesteal, taunt. You don't always, so it's not super reliable in that sense, but a lot of times you'll get something. In general, I haven't done any math exactly on how much you get expected out of this, but you get a lot. I'm pretty sure if you get 20 mana worth of tempo out of this, it's a low roll. It's absolutely insane the amount of pure stats you get out of this thing. And you can low roll, you can high roll as well, but in general, you're just going to get way more than you should for 9 mana. And it's worth mentioning that a huge part of the reason this card is prevalent currently is not actually because of Death Knight, it's because of a neutral card, Umbral Geist, which is a neutral minion that gives a random shadow spell, which is a huge premium card, largely because you have just a decent shot at actually hitting the Scourge. But yeah, that is the Scourge, just huge stats. And just one of those things where you better hope you already had lethal on board and this thing doesn't deny it, or you have a mass clear, or you're going to lose.
That doesn't even make sense!
Moving on to number 3 on this list, we have the one non-legendary card. It's Rune of the Archmage. This is the mage card, which is like the new puzzle box. It just casts a whole bunch of random spells and just does a whole lot of stuff. Anyone that's played a lot with this card knows exactly how powerful it is, but in case you're not familiar with just how random cards can be so powerful, well, first of all, Rune always hits enemies, so that's very important. But also it casts 20 mana worth of spells for only the cost of 9. So in general, you can waste some of the spells potentially, and it's still probably just going to do way too much. And the reason this is above like the Scourge, for example, which is a very similar concept, 9 mana do way too much, this is just much better reactively. In fact, you usually don't even want to play Rune if you're winning by a lot, because there is some risk it does a double-sided clear, like Mass Polymorph, and ruins your advantage. But this slot's a bit higher on this list exactly because it is just so effective as a comeback card. You'll often clear your opponent's board completely while also generating value and potentially disrupting your opponent's next play with secrets as well. Just an insanely powerful card, easily getting at this spot on this list. Okay, that can't be real. Now at number 2 on this list, we have Hydralodon, and this card holds a special place for me because it has contributed to more 12-win runs and 12-0 runs than probably any class legendary just ever. So I gotta give it that special shout out for contributing so well to my YouTube content. But in any case, I think it's a little bit deceptive just how strong Hydralodon is. It doesn't look as strong as some of the other Colossals, but a big factor of how good it is just the fact that it's in Hunter. Hydralodon forces you to be able to deal with the main 5/5 body before you can kill all of the appendages. Or you need to be able to deal with it all at once. And that's just really hard to do, especially in one turn for most classes. So it used to be a lot more common people just wouldn't be able to deal with the main body and they'd lose. Nowadays they can, but they often just won't be able to deal with the entire thing. And because it's Hunter, if a couple of those limbs just end up hitting you, you're probably just going to die. All in all, it just makes it the ultimate tool for pressing an advantage that you should already be pushing as a Hunter, making it one of the most feared and dominating finishers. Probably the most feared and dominating finisher ever. That's why it's number 2 on this list, second to only one legendary card, which is...
Alright, if you're trolling me, I'm out.
Number 1 is Lord Marrowgar, and I just want to say that this is a very distant number 1. It is not even close. This is far and away the best card to ever exist in Arena. Due to Blizzard adjustments, Death Knight has dropped off a bit, so it's not so absurd now in the pure stats, but towards the end of last meta, I saw this card tracking in at a 90% played win rate. 90%. That is mind-boggling. Can you imagine if there was a 90% played win rate card in Constructed? And so the reason this card is so strong is, as with a lot of the other cards high on this list, it's just way too many stats. In addition to some of the other ones like the Scourge, for example, this also gives a whole bunch of stats that all have Rush, just not the main body. So in practice, what this will do is it will pretty much always clear your opponent's board, and it will leave a board that will probably just one-shot the enemy hero in addition to that, making it so that a lot of the time it'll be about as good as, like, for example, Rune the Archmage and the Scourge combined. And this card is very hard to draft because it's locked behind that triple rune requirement. However, you can discover this a variety of ways through an undead discover, unholy discover, a legendary discover. There's various ways, so you will often see this discovered more than you actually see it drafted. So as soon as Death Knight becomes a major player in Arena again, you will be seeing a lot of these at high wins, and they're going to be deciding a whole lot of games. Oh, and I should mention that this does require corpses, but by the time you even have this card playable, you're going to have a good number of corpses. And the one thing is, if you're using it, you may just want to delay it as long as you can, unless you're forced to use it, because it only gets stronger and stronger the longer the game goes on. So that way you can maximize its use as an automatic win the game button. But with that, I'd be curious to hear from you guys. What do you think about all these cards? How do you like the increased power level of Arena? And how do you like this new video format? If you liked it, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and comment about any of these things. Appreciate you all. See you in the next one.
Why? How is that even a thing?